So hi everyone. So this is this week's vlog. So what have I been doing? Not that much really. So yeah, just chilling out and stuff. Just getting used to it being 2023. So the big news since my last vlog installment was Rishi Sunak and the Scottish Parliament, and Rishi Sunak using Article 35 to block the Gender Recognition Act reform bill that the Scottish Parliament democratically voted for. So let's get this right. This is the democratic decision of the Scottish Parliament to reform the Gender Recognition Act, and because Rishi Sunak and a few right-wing transphobes didn't like it, along with some left-wing transphobes, they blocked the act. And it's the first time that Rishi Sunak, it's the first time that the UK have used Article 35 to veto a democratic decision by the Scottish Parliament in Scottish Parliament's history, in the history of devolution. So we're talking about, like, what was it, 25 years ago that Scotland devolved from the UK. We have the same in Wales as well. The Welsh Parliament is devolved from the UK, from Westminster Parliament, but obviously Westminster just has contempt for the democratic decisions of devolved parliaments. So I'm going to move this camera a bit. There we go, a bit better. I'm more centered now. So yeah, and it's just wild to think that this decision by Rishi Sunak to veto Article 35, because the Gender Recognition Act reform bill that the Scottish Parliament democratically voted for would make trans people's lives easier, or slightly easier. I mean, it actually means that trans people in Scotland would have had the right to get a gender recognition certificate at the age of 16, so they have the right to change their legal gender at the age of 16 instead of 18. It would mean that we don't get buried under our dead name. It would mean that the Scottish trans people won't have their decision, to change their legal gender vetoed by a partner or married partner. So yeah, I mean, it's wild to think that the Tories are willing to risk the union of Scotland and England because they don't want trans people's lives in Scotland to be made easier, or slightly easier even. So it's not even it's going to make a big difference to trans people's lives. It'll help, and it will also mean that the Scottish Gender Recognition Act reform bill will also mean that it takes less time. It actually speeds up the process that a trans person can get their legal gender changed. So it actually speeds up the process for them doing that. And also it means that there was something else as well that it means, but it's just wild, I mean, I'm being cynical here. I mean, of all the unions that Rishi Sunak's right-wing buddies are telling him to destroy the union between Scotland and England and, you know, Wales and Northern Ireland is the one that the Tories don't want him to destroy, but he's just done that and they're all applauding him, you know. And I mean, like now, this will further the cause for Scottish independence, it'll further the cause for Welsh independence, you know. Mark Drakeford, who is First Minister here in Wales, has has spoken out against Rishi Sunak vetoing the Scottish decision. It has massive implications for how devolution is viewed, or how devolution is, because I mean, if a Westminster government can veto a democratic decision by a Scottish or a Welsh Parliament that easily, then what is the point of being devolved? We may as well go out for full independence, you know? I mean, so it kind of makes the Scottish and the Welsh parliaments look like just like sort of like they're there for show, you know. If the Westminster can do that, can completely ignore the democratic decision of a Scottish Parliament and potentially a Welsh Parliament. Mark Drakeford, our First Minister here in Wales, has spoken in favour of reforming the Gender Recognition Act, but we probably won't be able to do what Scotland did, because I think we don't have as many powers or something. I don't understand it, but I hope that they that the Welsh Parliament gets behind trans people and, it kind of supports reforming the Gender Recognition Act. And also with the Gender Recognition Act reform in Scotland, it would mean that people wouldn't need a medical diagnosis to change their gender. So, in obviously like here in the UK, anybody who's not from the UK, they may or may not know that like the waiting lists to get a medical diagnosis on the NHS are like over 3 years and upwards. So so it can take that long, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Sky's the limit, I mean, it can take like a decade even, for somebody to actually be able to change their legal gender in the UK, and it's wrong, Other countries have similar systems and the world hasn't gone to hell in a handcart. You don't see cis men pretending to be trans so they can gain access to women's spaces, and that's another thing. Rishi Sunak is saying he's vetoing this bill, the Gender Recognition Act reform bill, because he says it will threaten women-only spaces in particular, and actually the Gender Recognition Act has absolutely nothing to do with access to single-sex spaces. That's something that's guaranteed for trans people by the Equality Act, which was passed in 2010. But before that, there's never been any law stopping trans people from using whichever single-sex facility we prefer. So it's kind of like they've built up this whole UK media and the TERFs and the kind of right-wing alt-right lobby, the transphobic lobby as I call them, has built up this whole kind of this whole load of scaremongering about men self-IDing as women, cis men self-IDing as women, so that they can go into women's toilets, changing rooms and women's refuges to assault women. And it's all totally groundless, because the GRA, the Gender Recognition Act, has absolutely nothing to do with access to single-sex spaces. Now the big worry is now that Rishi Sunak and the kind of right wing of the Tory party that's in charge at the moment, I'm talking about the far right, I'm not talking about the Theresa May type Tories, I'm talking about the far right who seem to have captured the Tory party, and the far right kind of UKIP vote, and even more right wing than that, that the Tories are depending on for their votes, I mean. And also as well, it's the fact that you have the UK press in this country, the mainstream press, the traditional print media, which by admission is kind of becoming less and less important now that more people are getting their news on the internet, is all against trans people. They're all against trans people. So like not only the usual suspects like the right-wing Daily Mail, who were notorious for back in the 1930s supporting fascism and Hitler. They ran a headline, which some of you may know about, which read "Hurrah for the black shirts" when Mosley's black shirts started, their like hate rallies in the UK in the 1930s. The Daily Mail, they have a long history of support for the sort of far right and hatred of minority groups, and but it's not just them. I mean, the Times definitely, which used to be the paper of the establishment, that turned into a tabloid a good few years ago now, and it's become more and more transphobic, and not only them, but The Guardian, for instance. The Guardian is literally, they're transphobic, the UK Guardian, so much so that when they ran an editorial against Gender Recognition Act reform a couple of years ago, the US sort of edition of their paper distanced themselves from the UK Guardian's editorial, because the UK Guardian's editorial was on the side of the TERFs, saying it would threaten women's spaces, blah, blah, de blah, which is absolutely a load of rubbish, But, so they even the main left-wing paper in Newport, or the liberal left-wing paper, liberal stroke left paper in just in Newport, in the UK, not just here in Town Island, but in the UK, they're against trans people. Notably, when the Article 35 story of Rishi Sunak vetoing the Scottish Parliament over Gender Recognition Act reform, first time in its history, that Westminster has used Article 35 to veto a decision by the Scottish Parliament. Not one article in the Guardian, I didn't see one, like on the day. It's like headlines everywhere, and usually in the commenters free section they have articles by commentators, but there's absolutely nothing about it. And and I mean, least of all kind of the Guardian ever reaching out to a trans commentator or a prominent trans person, nothing at all, which is really, really strange. So it just shows how transphobia is so deeply embedded in the British establishment, whether it's like the right-wing establishment or the left-wing establishment. It's a massive problem, and I think we're not called TERF Island for nothing. I mean, it is absolutely ridiculous, and I know people abroad, in other countries, they kind of see the UK as very, very transphobic, kind of spearheaded. Like a typical example of that is J.K. Rowling, who is, who kind of horrified everyone by becoming a full-blown TERF, since a couple of years ago. And she went from being a beloved children's author to a full-blown TERF. It's mind-boggling. And on that note, I mean, the Labour Party, they haven't put up much of kind of opposition to Keir Starmer doing this. To Rishi Sunak doing this. I mean, Keir Starmer has actually instructed Labour politicians not to speak out against Article 35, against Rishi Sunak using Article 35. So Keir Starmer has actually told his MPs not to voice support for trans rights against, not to sort of attack Rishi Sunak for, trying to destroy trans rights, which is absolutely, just wild, really. I mean, it's... what can I say, you know? So I realise I've talked mostly about what's gone on, you know, with Rishi Sunak and vetoing the Scottish Parliament over the gender recognition reform. Yeah, I don't know where it'll all end, you know. I do know that there's now going to be a court case because obviously Nicola Sturgeon is going to contest this, so the Scottish Parliament's going to contest this with the Westminster. And guess who's paying for this court case? And guess who'll pay when, and I'm hoping they do lose, when Westminster lose and the Scots sort of like are able to implement Gender Recognition Act reform. It's going to be us, the taxpayer. We're paying for it in England and Wales. We will be paying for Rishi Sunak and the Westminster government, Westminster Tory government, to put up a defence for attacking our rights, and when they lose we'll be paying the court fees as well. So I mean, it's just, it's as I say, you know, words fail me, you know. I think I've said most of what I wanted to say. So please do tell me what you think down below in the comments. And I'm sure there are a lot of people, especially trans people, but not only trans people, and Scottish people obviously as well, Scottish and trans, you know, you must be really, I'd be fuming by now. I mean, I'm Welsh and trans and I'm fuming about it. But if I was a trans Scot, I would be absolutely, well, you know, I'd have to watch my blood pressure, put it that way. And I have to do that anyway already. So please let me know what you think. You know, what do you think of Rishi Sunak vetoing a democratic decision by the Scottish Parliament to reform the Gender Recognition Act and make trans people's lives just a tiny bit easier? What do you think of what he's done? You know, what do you think the outcome will be? What do you hope the outcome will be? So yeah, please do tell me in the comments below. So I guess, well, thank you for watching, and thank you to all the new people who've subscribed, and thank you to all my existing subscribers. If you feel like subscribing, please do subscribe down below. And yeah, until the next time, au revoir.